This is a special crossover episode of the Visu.News and Around the Lens podcast. We're recording this on the third anniversary of the Unite the Right rally in Charlottesville that ended in the death of Heather Heyer and severe injuries to dozens more. I'm here with a handful of photojournalists who were there that day, and we'll be discussing what has and has not changed since then. Our conversation starts with the Tiki Torch March, and then on to the next day, the actual Unite the Right rally, and then we move on to how covering the far right has changed and discussing some of the new risks of working as a photojournalist covering protests. I apologize I didn't have each person do a proper intro of themselves, so I will list who was on the call in the order in which they spoke. You can find their socials and websites in the show notes. First, we have Sandy Bacum, who I am almost certainly pronouncing her last name wrong. I'm sorry, Sandy. I'm not quite sure. I can't ever get it right. She is a freelance video journalist based in New York City with Getty and also Now This News. You can find her work at sandybacum.com. John Rudolph is a freelance photojournalist with SEPA USA and based in Portland, Oregon. You can find his work at rudolphphoto.com. Ford Fisher is an independent video journalist and co-founder of news2share.com, based in Washington, D.C. Emily Molly is a video and still journalist and founder of scener.com. That's SCNR.com. Michael Nigro is a freelance photojournalist and film director from New York City. You can find his work at Instagram.com/NigroTime. And I'm Zach D. Roberts, a freelance photojournalist and co-founder of Visu.News and AroundTheLens.com. So this is a very impromptu, just a couple hours ago, kind of chat with the handful of people that I know that were in Charlottesville 3 years ago at the Unite the Right rally. I think everyone probably knows. We don't have to delve into too much of what that was, other than just, one of the larger gatherings of white nationalists and white supremacists and Nazis and militia and oath keepers and whatever else, whoever else was there.
Whoever else crawled,
at least on the East Coast. I think on the East Coast, at least, there might be West Coast, like the Proud Boy gatherings and things like that were on some level, but I'm sorry, I'm distracted by John's dog. Just wandering by there. But yeah, so this is, I don't necessarily have like an agenda to talk about it. I've been trying to work on a piece talking about this is an anniversary, and it's kind of been affected by the fact that surprisingly, even though the news media usually loves their anniversaries to kind of like talk and use B-roll and use footage they've already paid for and things like that, I haven't seen anything. I mean, obviously we have VP nomination being discussed. Trump had just did a hour-long ramble session about, I literally have no idea what he was talking about.
Zach, the parking garage is in one of these commercials. They just showed it in I don't know if it's Project Lincoln or somebody's commercial today. I saw Charlottesville footage and the parking garage.
Oh, the footage from part. So it was probably
it was the footage. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I'm blinking on the journalist's name. There's the footage, but yeah, no, it's been weird that it's been a conversation that Joe Biden likes to use the footage from, but not necessarily talk. I mean, like no one has any plan on what happens if there is a post-Trump. Say just in general, if there's a post-Trump, like if we all exist post-Trump. Sorry, but in all seriousness, like what, like the fact that what, I guess like it's the first question is like delve right into it. Like I don't know. I mean, start with Sandy just as the thing. Like what do you feel like has anything changed in the 3 years since the Unite the Right rally and since Charlottesville?
I didn't know any of you there. I knew nothing about Nazis. I knew nothing about Unite the Right or anything, but a photographer friend said, let's go down there. There's going to be the largest gathering of white supremacists. I didn't know what that meant. And I got there the next day. Was everybody there the night before on this?
Yes, I think all of us were.
No, I wasn't. No, I was not. Because I caught a red eye the next day.
Yeah, and I got there very, very early in the morning. And then I literally met Ford in SAC when I tripped or was tripped and I cracked my skull open, and it's like Rashomon. There's 4 people that have video of me breaking my head open.
Yeah.
So my life started with my obsession with the right-wing white supremacists after Charlottesville.
Yeah.
So I came really late to the party.
So I came early to the party, and I'd been following this stuff since before Trump came down that goddamn escalator.
Yeah.
And so I knew what was going on. And I came to Charlottesville, on the 11th, and by chance I was in the same hotel as Stephanie.
Mm-hmm.
And she had a car and I didn't.
Yeah.
And we got to talking somehow. I guess we'd known each other from Standing Rock. And she said, there's this parade, this torchlight thing going on. Let's go take a look. And I would have missed that were it not for her. And I am eternally indebted to her for that, because to me, that was really the heart of what was going on in Charlottesville. Riots are riots, so 3 for a penny, but that parade was a turning point in modern American history.
I mean, that's the imagery that I've seen, like of my work, like that's the imagery that like I have, like the only way I know for the most part, like where things are is like I have a report of where things are published on my like Nerf photo wire service thing. And my number one photo used I think 3,000 times or something like that is that one of the photos from the Tiki Torch March, which I should also add, gentleman who's not here, Shay Horse, otherwise I would have no idea. He was just like, something's going to happen. Something's going to happen. And then he was like, okay, it's happening at the, what was it? The Nameless field. I still don't remember the
No Name Field.
No Name Field. Literally, that's the name of it on Google. That's everything. It's the No Name Field.
Yeah, which added to how sort of ominous it was.
Yeah.
In Alejandro, in my case, we sort of speculated that something would be happening that night, although we didn't know about it. So we actually went first to the Lee statue itself, just to see who else was looking around. I would add that day, August 11th, sort of while I was en route there, and I think probably quite likely before any of us were in the city, there was already a small altercation that happened at Walmart involving Chris Cantwell. So it felt like things were already moving, and it was just sort of a matter of where. So once we had sort of, the particular people I was with sort of checked into the hotel, we ventured toward the center of the city. I actually wore my vest. I wore a bulletproof vest, not knowing what was going to happen. And granted, nobody got, there weren't any ostensible firearms, I guess I'll say, at UVA, but I still don't actually regret having worn it, because when we saw it was actually IGD was the way that we found out about the torch rally that night. And so we kind of sprinted basically to UVA from the Lee Park. I'm sorry, IGD, it's going down. It's sort of an anti-fascist news collective. Yeah, I mean, I think that torch rally, like you guys all said, it sort of was a turning point in American politics. But I think that there's this difference between the way that politics go in terms of rhetoric and the way that politicians sort of use things against each other versus what the actual policies being advocated for are. And so it's been really weird seeing we've mentioned how no one's really been talking about the anniversary, but with Kamala Harris having just been picked, it reminded me that when Joe Biden announced his run, his announcement video included Charlottesville footage in it.
Exactly. Yeah.
And I remember finding that challenging, having been there, because Joe Biden did not actually visit Charlottesville in the immediate aftermath. And my understanding is that he never really met with the organizers of the anti-fascists that he sort of was aligning himself with in the ad, kind of.
Yeah, right? Yeah. No, I remember.
Did any of you listen to the speeches today by Biden and Harris? I listened.
No.
I
don't think anyone did.
I did. I listened to the whole thing, and both of them made extensive reference to Charlottesville.
Oh,
very extensive. And they both said, especially Harris, that this is not the vision of America we have. This is not the vision of very fine people on both sides. And she was very, very emphatic about that. And so was Biden. the Charlottesville event was prominently mentioned in the announcement for the presidency.
Right.
Yeah.
This is a big deal.
I feel like, what he rumored early on was that the announcements was going to happen in the first week of August, and that it didn't. And so I actually, now that you say that, like, I actually really wonder whether or not he made the conscious decision to have the real announcement and the real speech and everything like that on the two anniversary days. Because there's not just one anniversary, there's the Tiki Torch, and then there's, people have kind of a mushy version of what happened there, which is, part of the problem is the fact that, we still have the conversation that, one person died and that's kind of all that happened. Heather Heyer was murdered and that's it. And the idea that DeAndre Harris, literally another minute or so, probably would have been dead. You had just pure, I always hate phrasing, luck. Shots fired, yeah. No, but the idea that Fields, the man that murdered Heather Heyer with his vehicle, that idea that, you watch that footage, you watch the footage of any angle, photos or whatever, the idea that only one person died is fucking miraculous.
Well, and also literally
sheer dumb luck.
Yeah.
Luck.
So I was taken to the hospital. I was injured 10
it's Sandy is
right?
let's
And I wound up in the hospital, and they brought a guy in my room. I had broken my arm, and my head was fucked up. And they brought a guy in my room who had been hit by flying bodies, and he saw my press pass. He said, "I want the world to know that this was murder." That he backed up, right? Yeah. Michael had his camera was yanked out of his hand. Yeah. And I shot Fields all day long from when he got there early in the morning, and I watched his rage build. It was the weirdest thing to watch it all at once. And then the video that they used in his trial was actually, for some reason, it's my shot, but the guy standing next to me was a local photographer, where he's full of rage, and he's giving the finger, and he's going, Jews will not replace us. And we all thought, John, you talked about the first time you heard Jews will not replace us. As being a Jewish person, how'd that feel?
Yeah, I have to say, and Zach, if there's one take-home message I can make briefly about myself, and as you know, I don't like doing that, but that Tiki Torch parade was the most physically unsettling thing I have ever seen in my life. I've seen an awful lot, and I've been shooting bad shit for years before this. And I've said this to each of you in the past, but it bears recording. I felt that this was like taking LSD. And I know exactly, I've taken LSD, lots and lots. I know what an LSD trip is like. And seeing that Tiki Torch parade was for me like being on an acid trip. It's like seeing something in front of you that you literally do not believe exists. Right. It's like the old gag about the engineer who looks at a bumblebee and says, "That can't possibly fly." I looked at this phenomenon and I said, "This can't possibly exist." And there it was.
Yeah. I was commenting earlier, yesterday when I was talking about this with another person, the fact that until the only person that I know that got confronted by police was a drone operator, which was, I assume it was Vice. They always have a drone. So, and they obviously have footage and everything like that. But the only people that got confronted was by police that night, until after they cleared the Jefferson, square there, around the monument. That was a journalist operating a drone, and that was, they just allowed it to happen. They allowed the entire march, which, as far as I know, was complete. I assume it was unpermitted. I can't imagine you can get a permit.
My understanding was that it was unpermitted, and they basically warned the police with extremely short notice. We're coming, we're doing this.
There may have been some tissue of legitimacy, because Jason Kessler, who was the organizer of the march, was a graduate of UVA. Yeah. And so there may, and I don't know what the laws are.
Spencer too.
Richard Spencer was also a graduate.
Yeah.
I didn't.
I don't assume though that I can go to SUNY Oswego, where I graduated from, with 300 white people and like, and to be like,
No.
we're gonna hold torches and march around in
Yeah.
circles. I just don't assume that's the thing that happened. I mean,
That's a safe bet.
like
The other thing
obviously,
that
yeah. Go ahead, Ford.
The thing that I would add on the particular point we were talking about is that if you watch Documenting Hate on PBS, the ProPublica film, it showed that A.C. Thompson asked the chief of police, I believe on the 11th, but it might have been the 10th, at a press conference, we've been hearing rumors about another torch march. Do you know about that? And the the police chief said, well, we haven't heard anything about that, but we'd like to know anything that you have to share about it.
Zach,
From their perspective, they just didn't know.
Stop. Just Zach, let Michael on the call. He just sent me a note.
Oh.
There you go.
But I mean, it speaks to, as we're waiting for Michael to come on,
There he is.
I think that, and hi, Michael. I mean, one of the major themes that I think we saw there, which some police departments may have learned from and others might not have, was basically the total gross incompetence of the overall police apparatus there. And so
they stood down.
So there was the stand down, but the thing that I would point out that I think is the thing that I read in the Heafy report that was the most ridiculous point that I have not seen talked about a lot is that the Charlottesville police were leading it, which makes sense. It's their city. They're supposed to be in charge. And then it was state police augmenting them. And then basically feds like sort of behind that, National Guard or whatever. The Charlottesville Police Department was, of course, outnumbered by state cops. There were more state cops there, but CPD is supposed to be in charge. Their radios weren't synced. The CPD was standing there with the state police in Charlottesville, standing next to each other, but literally they were not talking to each other all day. So one command would not actually make it to all of them. So we saw a fragmented and confused and mostly uninvolved sort of uniform. They're all just blue to us, but on their end, the people in charge, who were fewer of them, were not able to communicate with the people who were, the greater number of police officers and not in charge. So on their end, there was a complete communications shit show. And I think that probably led to a lot of the lack of coordination out there.
The police also refused to accept any information from on the ground activists that had known that had heard messages from the fact, like had seen, whether it be Telegram chats or whatever, that saying that they were planning to bring shields and sticks and kind of different, whatever you want to qualify as weapons, but things that could be seen as offensive weapons as well. That's more for the next day and that sort of thing. But the fact that they basically decidedly, including the feds as well, decided to ignore those messages is also one of those things that I think is incredibly important in the fact that, like, we had no idea this was going to happen, which is kind of always the mantra of, whenever something really bad happens, whether it be 9/11 or whether it be this, it's like, the lack of imagination. We couldn't imagine that, hundreds of white supremacists in a state that has really open gun laws and weapon laws and things like that would possibly somehow turn violent. I think again, like the fact that it should be also noted, because we haven't gotten to like the 12th yet because we're still talking about the Tiki Torch March. But is the fact that that even that night, multiple people were severely wounded and attacked at the end of the rally when the white nationalists that were marching surrounded a small group of anti-fascist activists that were around the thing, and then that they were. I still have a distinct memory. I don't have a photo of it, but I have a still distinct memory of one of the marchers literally using the tiki torch as a spear and throwing it at the anti-fascist activists. I don't know how somebody wasn't severely injured from that. But again, was like pure luck that it didn't happen. But these people were immediately on the night of the 11th committing violence against, as far as I can tell, peaceful activists. None of them had weapons. None of them had defensive, anything.
So they were basically linked arms, and then they had a few of them had like a banner.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I mean, I know that I think at least one person might have had pepper spray or something like that. But like, cause I think it was put off on both sides, but like, but it was,
deployment.
was that?
Yeah, I'm not sure.
Not by police. I'm saying in a defensive
no, I know,
thing.
but you're saying by the counter protesters. Yeah. I'm actually not 100% sure if mace was deployed by one side. I vaguely remember that there was a report that like one of the right wingers had taken mace out of the hand of a left winger.
I mean, the right wingers absolutely did, because I know that at least a handful of people. Yeah, I mean, I literally have a photo of it. I have a photo of a handful of people getting pepper sprayed or maced or whatever it was. I just see a stream and from the distance, but. And the fact that, I mean, I thought that it wasn't gonna. I thought that was the night.
Actually, I do. Now that I'm thinking about it, I do remember a shirtless Christopher Cantwell going into No Name Field and going, I got maced. So, and then
the crying Nazi. I mean, that's how he got his nickname. So I mean,
no, that isn't how he got his nickname.
Oh, it's not. I mean,
no,
it was after the interview. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
After that,
I shot Cantwell after he'd been maced, and he was shirtless, and he had obviously been hit with pepper spray, and I'd also photographed one other guy who I believe was one of the students or Antifa or whoever who had also been pepper sprayed, and I shot the two of them side by side.
Yeah.
And the cops were hosing them both off.
Yeah.
But that was the only pepper spray that I saw.
Yeah.
Can I ask you something about the Antifa? Because I vaguely heard about them at Occupy Wall Street. They were they wore the Guy Fawkes mask and they were black and stuff. But they were there as anti-fascists to fight the Nazis, right? I mean,
Occupy was more
wrong for them.
Like what you're describing is more like for Antifa, like back in Occupy would have been like Black Bloc or something like that.
Black Bloc, yeah.
So I mean, like that's a distinctly. I would at least argue that it's a distinctly different group of people. Antifa includes people like Molly from Charlottesville, who goes to meetings.
So my question was, I was there when Ford and I were in the same spot when the first punches were pulled.
And
I moved back. And I moved back because I'm old and it was scary, and there was a line of Antifa. They were linked arms, right? And I didn't realize this because I was blocked by a car. I couldn't see it. But there was they came across that horrible scene with the flags and all those guys coming, all of a sudden just, whatever they were shouting, blood and soil or whatever. And then the Antifa were blocking the way, but linking arms and almost like a peaceful thing. So then the punches started flying. But how did they get to be, my question is, how did they get to be number one terrorists? Because my experience of them, the night of the Proud Boys attack was they were just, they're anti-fascists. So I don't understand.
I mean, I think that what's important is that it's a completely decentralized movement or ideology, right? So, I mean, in the extreme, some people will say, if you're against fascism, then you're anti-fascist. And that might be an overly broad definition. Yeah. But with that being said, even if you're going to be more precise than that, individual, chapters, groups, whatever, form and have varying different tactics. I think that for Fox News viewers, Antifa means people who dress like ninjas and do violence, which is essentially all that sort of a Tucker Carlson is going to present of that movement. That does exist, but it's not the totality of that movement at all. And so in the case of Charlottesville and in the case of really, I mean, most situations that have an Antifa presence, I think that there's really a varying degrees of risk level and violence acceptability level. So while some anti-fascists would generally argue that it's acceptable to use violence to stop people who are propagating the spread of fascist ideas or whatever it is, it's not like every single person who believes in that ideology is personally involving themselves in it. So yeah, in that particular moment that you're describing, and I remember it quite well, yeah, they were linking arms, and basically the Traditionalist Workers' Party ran into them with shields and also basically flagpoles that they could use as spears to kind of smash their way through. And there was one moment that was very difficult for me, which was that there was one of the leftists basically got stuck into the right-wing crowd. Most of the people had been kind of pushed like away as that happened in the fighting.
Ponytails?
There was one woman. I shouldn't assume genders, but there was one female person who,
this was 2017. People had genders back then.
You're in trouble for saying that.
I think it was a woman.
Come here.
Who was being basically got into the middle,
yeah.
and she attempted to sort of walk through them and was yelling, "It's a public street! It's a public street!" And they basically were just beating her up. Right?
Yeah.
They pushed her to the ground, kind of got back up. They pushed her to the ground again. And then when she got up again, one guy basically just went up to her and just maced her in the face.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, I got some pretty clear footage of that. They took her phone too, and which is why she kind of stayed in the scrum for a bit. She was trying to get her phone back.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, it was just, I was right next to her when she sort of got engulfed in that group, and people were trying to beat her up. Somebody took her phone, which is why she kind of like stuck in the middle of it. She was trying to get her phone back. And yeah, she just got totally assaulted by that whole group.
On the street, right? This was not. Yes. Okay.
When they marched into town with the flags and they hit the edge of the park, and the Antifa were like locking arms to block them,
right?
Apparently, and I couldn't see because there was a van right near me, and the cops were standing right against the building. They were just totally doing nothing, like meter maids. And but they started punching each other, so I moved back. But Ford, you were right in it, and Emily, you were there too.
Yeah.
Wow. And Stephanie was there. Stephanie was there too.
I sadly arrived. I always assumed that protests start late, and so I arrived like 30 minutes early. So I ended up missing most of that.
I literally. Wall Street mind.
I know, right? I know. Like that's my problem. Being like, and I mean, I still was convinced after the tea church march that nothing was going to happen the next day.
That was
I was like,
right?
This they blew their load. This is their thing, and that was a thing. And so like my group, it was like me, Shay, Daniel Schuler, and
Daniel.
I thought there was one other person, but like we.
Well, Albin Lord Jones.
I know of him, but I don't know.
I went down there with him. Yeah.
But like we arrived, literally walked onto the scene, and tear gas, like gas or some like smoke, was already deployed out there, and the violence was already kind of, people were throwing shit back and forth between the two different lines, and so I walked in and I was just like, crap, I was wrong.
He has a shot. Alvin has a shot where he's like, I mean, he's right on the guy, and the Nazi is just like spraying him dead on. I don't know how and then I saw him a couple of minutes later. I looked down, and he was completely covered with pepper spray or whatever it was. And he was writhing in pain.
I photographed him
right
when
after
that was going on. And my photo is unfortunately so clear that you can see you can see the bubbles coming out his nose. But
you were there. You were there too.
Oh yeah.
Oh, because I got video of it. That's
and it's really there. It's a horrendous set of pictures, and I realized how awful it was. And then about 5 minutes later, I was in exactly the same situation.
He stayed with me
bubbles
that
coming
night.
out of my nose.
He missed his bus or something, and so he stayed in my room. And he was wearing that shirt. I said, "Dude, you got to get out of it. You have to," because I was coughing because it just smelled so bad. So he went and bought. And I think Shay was staying at that same hotel. Some little.
Yeah, he was staying. He was staying in my. I forget, it was some.
He went out to have a cigarette, and that's Shay was in apparently. But
yeah,
buy another shirt. But. Wow. Did you guys know each other before there? Did anybody know each other?
Yeah, I think John and I had met before that at a protest in Portland, and I definitely knew Zach before then.
And I knew Michael from the RNC in Standing Rock.
Right.
Standing Rock.
We met, so I had walked into the park. That's right. You're right. I first started coming out. I came out of my car and I'm walking, and I just asked a cop, I'm like, which way is Emancipation Park, I think it was called. And he goes, There's about 5,000 really fucking angry people over there. If you want to. And I went, oh, okay. And then I look over and I see this guy with blood just coming straight down his head.
Oh my God.
I'm going to get my helmet and my jacket.
I'll be right back.
I left everything in my car.
I got my jacket, my helmet on, I strapped it on, and I started walking through the park, and this woman looks at me and she goes, "It's not Vietnam." And I'm like, oh, okay, maybe I'm overdressed for the situation. I'm like, fuck it, let's go. I walk over and I walk into the park and I immediately hit in the head with a plank of wood. Just like, wow. I'm like, oh my God. And then Hawk Newsom's there and he looks at me and goes, dude, you're right. Yeah, I'm like, Hawk. And he's like, Nigro. And we just talked, and Hawk had like just some really interesting things to say on the live stream. And I peeled back because I'm like, I gotta prep. I'm like not prepped at all. So I peeled out, and then I see John, and I go, "Hey, John!" And you're like, "You!" You grab me, and you go, "These people are armed to the fucking teeth."
Yeah.
Right.
I'm like, yeah, I think so. And we talked for a bit, and playing out in the background of us. I don't know if you remember this kind of viral video, but there was a guy
taking off his clothes,
taking off his shirt because he was being chased because he was wearing the uniform of, and you can see it. John and I are like hugging. We haven't seen each other in like a year. And we're like hugging. We're like, oh my God, this like, and behind it, this guy is like panicking and taking off his clothes and like, oh my God, like these people are gonna kill me. Yeah. But I knew Sandy. I knew of Ford through, I think, Andrew Kimmel. And I knew of Zach because I knew Shay as well.
I didn't know Ford. I didn't know Zach. I didn't know Sandy.
But you're in my shot. You were in a shot of mine.
Yeah,
I was like,
it was the back of my head.
I was a block away from everything. But there was when the other side of the park. Actually, that shot is on your Facebook page. One of the shots got some refused fascism signs or something. And there's like a lot of smoke in the background, and your helmet is like you go up there with your camera, and that's how I met you.
That's correct.
First time, but I didn't meet you till later.
I guess like what are the memories? Like what's the moment that you remember the most from? I don't know how to ask this question without sounding like, what's your memories from Charlottesville? But I mean, like what's the moment that? I guess the better question is like, what's the moment that you're like, this is something different? That like throughout the day, whatever it was, that you're like, this is not just the for all of us. I mean, I assume at that point it was the 75th protests, 100 of that year, especially 2017 that we covered. I mean, that I've covered a lot of violent protests, and this event still has there's been nothing like it that I've covered.
I'm happy to lead off on that one. In a word, it was that tiki torch parade. Mm-hmm. There was a bunch of milling around and preparations in that park for maybe 3/4 of an hour or an hour, and then they, with some degree of precision, started marching off, and I was right up at the front of them. And if you're looking forward, if you're looking forward as they're looking forward, I was on the right side of the march, right at the head. And they'd marched not more than, I'd say, 75 yards. And they started this chant, "You will not replace us."
Right, and then it morphed.
And then it morphed very quickly into "Jews will not replace us." And I'm marching, and I'm hearing this. I didn't hear that right? I heard that as plain as the nose on your face. And I thought to myself, this is something different. This is everything that existed under the flat rock of American horrors has now been let out into the open. Yeah. And I was right.
Yeah.
This wasn't the dog whistle. This was the trombone. And that, I will remember that as long as I live.
As long as you live.
Emily?
For me, it was like I went into the park. I finally got the nerve to go into the park because it was a din, and all the Nazis were in there. It was like crazy time. I think it was before I don't know whether it's before or after the fighting because the chronology is crazy. But all of a sudden, I see these guys doing the Heil Hitler, and they're chanting David Duke, David Duke, and I fucking turned, and he was there. He was next to me, and he just had like Botox or something. He had this like weird shiny face.
He's been like that for the last decade.
And they're
but
going,
yeah.
David Duke, David Duke, and they're doing the Heil Hitler. And then you couldn't hear him, but I got one of the only interviews with him where he said, "We're here to fulfill the promise of Donald Trump. That's why we voted for him." And those words, like, John, that was my moment. Well, what the fuck? Because that tied in what's going on in the White House, right? That they were there in the name of Donald Trump. They were wearing the MAGA hats, and they were doing the Heil Trump, and they were doing Jews do not replaces in the name of Donald Trump, like at the rallies.
Yep.
You and I are saying the two sides of the same thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It was all of a sudden I go this, and seeing a swastika flag for the first time. That was fucking in America.
Yep.
And I said, I wish I shot more of them. I found out there was only one guy. There was apparently only one guy with a swastika. And the Hitler T-shirt. That was good. Where do you get that?
There were a lot of smaller swastika things, I guess.
Oh, there were?
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
actually, this was probably a big thing. There was one gigantic shirtless man who had a swastika tattooed on his right breast.
Yeah.
So,
Like a
I mean,
square hug of a man, right? Like a square man.
yeah,
Yeah.
it was
Yeah.
I don't,
His real name is SpongeBob.
SpongeBob had a tough time in prison. Yeah, he was a larger. I wouldn't say gentleman. Emily.
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 You know, it's really hard to pinpoint one thing, but I guess I will say, you know, going into it, I saw the guy with the swastika flag, and you know, I was shocked by it, but not surprised. I snapped some photos of that. It's probably still one of my best-selling photos. Is just like the one dude with the swastika with a bunch of other weird right-wing extremist groups behind him.
Mm-hmm.
But I think seeing so many people there from so many different groups on the extremism side who just came with shields, with their insignia, and, you know, makeshift weapons as well, that kind of showed that they were ready and organized to bust some heads and really just put up a fight. It kind of, if you look at like how armed they were and how they had their shields like ready made to go, spray painted with their like all their symbols or whatever, versus sort of the counter protest and anti-fascist groups, like there was sort of a clear intention with the extremists there that they were coming for a fight. They really wanted to fuck some people up.
Yeah.
And you know, I've seen a lot of protests since then. You see protesters with shields and stuff, but there was something that just rang extremely different about their presence with those shields.
Yeah. It was the organization. It was the fact that, like, I mean, since then, like, you know, I mean, there's Tennessee, there's been dozens, and usually it's like one or two groups together and that's it. But the fact that you had, I don't know, probably like a dozen different groups all in one place, all kind of working together, that like genuinely was one of the things. Was like, you know, I mean, like, as a person who's been a SPLC member for years and like followed generally the extreme far right, well, at least I guess we could use to say it's the far right now. Now this is just kind of the right. But the fact that like all of these people working together, I mean, like literally, like when you have like you read history books, I mean, like one of the things that like stop people from the complete like white supremacy movement from gaining mainstream is the fact that like the Klan hated Catholics, and so the Catholics wouldn't work, you know, like the Catholic far right wouldn't work with the, you know, I mean, like you had things like that, and now you can actually be a Catholic and be part of the Klan, which is pretty terrifying. I mean, never mind all the thing, but at least, you know, it's opening up society. I mean, like as a Catholic, I can anyway. But
Zach, tell me about the parking garage, because that.
I want to get through everybody first before Michael. You have it.
Yeah, mine kind of came in increments. I mean, the protests sometimes just come across as like big sausages. It's just like, there it is, and then I go home.
Yeah.
And then there's also the ones who just like have a peak and then it's done.
Nothing. Yeah.
and you're like, okay, now I go home. This one was, I missed Tiki Torch, and I walked into that park, and it was just the first thing I remember seeing was this line of Richard Spencer haircuts, like pushing against a line of cops, like literally pushing against a line of cops, like, and I'm like, this is bizarre. I'm like, what's happening here? And that slowly morphed into a line of the shields that came forward that looked some out of Game of Thrones, where they had taken the bolts and put them straight through, so they were poking outward. And I watched them run into people as if it was like a puncture device. And then you kind of you collect yourself. But like the pinnacle for me was like being clipped by that car.
Yeah.
Like it just was, and it did not come to fruition really, and until I watched Spike Lee's movie at the end, which I was completely surprised about.
Yes.
I mean, full disclosure, that was really traumatic for me. Like it really kind of messed my head up for a while. But when I saw this, I was with my daughter. We're watching it, and it came out of nowhere. And you see the car, and then I see me there, and I look at it, and I'm like, oh my God. I actually realized why he didn't actually run me over. It is because of the bikes, the city bikes that were there.
Wow.
And I was right in front of that city bike, and I just moved to the right in front of it because he would have gotten tangled in those city bikes, I think. That's my, and I just was like, just blown away. That city bikes perhaps saved me.
Well, didn't you lose everything too, Michael?
I lost a camera body, because I didn't get well, the car hit the camera that was on my hip, and I moved away, and I remember just going, what an asshole. I honestly said, what an asshole. And
you were right.
Yeah.
Not wrong.
And then it was the next day that I realized my ring, which is still in the shape of a football, was bent. So my hand was there.
Could have taken your finger off.
Well, I don't know. Like it's just the shape of a football. I don't know if you can see it.
Wow.
Oh.
Yeah.
Well, no, Michael, I don't remember the exact sequence of events, but at some point I was in a car with somebody had, and we saw you walking along the street, and I think we picked you up and we drove some, no, that's not right.
You offered, you're like, hey.
That's it. Okay.
And we talked.
And you were really out to lunch. You were really fried.
Yeah, I was. And you offered, you're like, come on, let's go to this thing. And I'm like, I am in no shape. Like, I'm literally in no shape to do this. And you were going to get out of the car. And I was like, no, I'm fine. Go. I believe, and this, I could be really wrong here, but isn't this the ride with Stephanie that
that was much later.
Okay, so beyond that, being so fried, I got in my car, and I had to go. I went back to DC. I drove back to DC, and almost got into a horrific accident. To which I'm like, all right, I need to stop and just get water and take it easy. And that's when Chris Hedges called me. And he said, look, I know, he goes, look, this was traumatic for you. He had been a war correspondent. And he said, look, what you need to do is definitely don't go home and drink.
Wow.
File your work and let the adrenaline he just kind of walked me through it. He said, you just let the adrenaline just kind of work itself through you. And that was like super, super helpful for me. I did get home. I got to went to DC, friend's apartment. No one was there. I filed my photos and watched Quigley Down Under.
You know, Michael, first of all, coronavirus and Charlottesville in one lifetime? Jesus Christ, man. You know, I have post-traumatic
And he's only 40.
I have post-traumatic stress. The night of the Proud Boys attack, Shay and I were there. And when they started running around me, and I got against a car, so because they were so huge and stuff, my heart started pounding, and I was in Charlottesville again because it was this random violence out of nowhere, and that it triggered it for me. I don't know. Has that happened to you? Have you been in situations like that? They get the fear gets triggered again?
Not recently, but right after that, and I didn't realize this, but it's a physical response. It's a chemical physical response, and
traumatic stress.
And I didn't actually realize that it was happening until like it really started to happen. You'd hear a screech of tires, and I would. Oh, you guys are all friends. I literally would just like start weeping. It was weird. Like I was just like,
yeah, I did too. I started crying. And Shay said he had the same experience.
And my wife was looking at me like, she's like, I'm like, I think I'm kind of fucked up.
Yeah.
But you know,
Ford, what about you? You were in some really bad. Was that the first time you were in an assault like that? Right in the middle of it?
I mean, I had filmed a lot of like street violence before, but I think until like 2017-ish time, I think most of the violence that I had filmed was really like people versus police. So, I mean, it was definitely different to see it evolve into civilian on civilian political violence in 2017. So that was new. I remember actually I had this distinct emotion in the morning of watching the violence where I felt like I was disturbed, but like kind of calmly navigating it to the best I could. I had
bear witness, yeah.
I had really spent a lot of time with Alejandro, was sort of the news director of News to Share at the time. And so him and I had really studied the environment that was going to be there, like where Lee Park was, where people would likely be moving in from and so forth. So I felt like I had prepared as best I could. I was wearing a helmet and a vest. Not that that makes you invincible, but like, I think I felt like I was, you know, going to be safe, even though I ended up like, I joked that like I wore a helmet and a vest, but then like all three injuries like were to like things that weren't that. So like,
It's always,
you know, I got maced 2 times and I took like a flagpole to the neck, which took about a week to feel normal again, as well as a paint balloon that exploded on my camera. But I was able to get it like professionally cleaned, whatever.
I got urine bombed.
Yeah.
Oh,
right.
yeah.
That was awful.
Yeah.
Oh,
question for everybody.
me and Andy.
That's right.
My question is this kind of, I don't even know how to say it, this protection behind the camera, which I definitely feel like I didn't.
I know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
I didn't realize it until Standing Rock when I got chased and my cell phone snapped off and then the camera just like broke and it was just like down the side of the hill and I was like,
yeah,
I got nothing to hide behind.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's weird. Yep. Like I think like, so this is 2017 and I'm like, now what do I do? What do I do? Like, I don't know. Do you guys feel that there is a potential? Like,
absolutely. And it's completely spurious. It's completely psychological. A camera is no protection at all.
You mean
Zero.
the press badge doesn't protect you from
Zero?
Go to Portland and find out.
Exactly. Yeah.
I'm kind of invincible.
Yeah. How you guys doing, by the way? Yeah.
And fortunately, I have never been uncameraed. I've always walked away with the same number of cameras that I came in with. They've been a little different shape and a little different colored, but I've had the same number going out as going in.
Mm-hmm.
But yes, I somehow feel, yeah, I've got it. It's going to be okay. And now I know it's not.
Yeah.
Emily,
that hole in my leg reminds me.
I'm very curious as to, because I watch you guys work, and
fearless.
You just kind of negotiate. It's like this Harry Potter cape of darkness.
I know.
And it's a false sense of security, utterly.
Of course
Absolutely.
it's false. It's totally spurious.
Yeah. No, it's a hard thing to reckon with, because we're not invincible, and I feel like Portland was kind of actually like a really good testament to this, because I had a vest, I had a helmet, I had knee pads, and I had shin guards, and the only thing that wasn't covered was my arms, and of course that's where I get hit. But like I feel emboldened by having a camera to get up like along the front lines, and you just hope that the big block letters saying press along your helmet and your body is enough to keep you safe. But police is one thing, they can still target you and claim plausible deniability. But when it comes to some of these right-wing groups, they're not going to give a shit. They're going to, in fact, probably target you even more because you're part of the fake news.
Yeah.
Well, in New York, you know what's happening in New York, right? I was with Stephanie, and there was some Black Lives Matter thing recently, and she had posted some pictures of them with their faces on Instagram, and they went after it. They had Stephanie Keaton, they delete those pictures, and I'm seeing this more and more where they just don't want their pictures taken. Have you guys experiencing that at all?
That's a chronic problem. We've all experienced it. It's not going to go away. It's like the fucking weather. It's just going to keep raining on us. There's not a fucking thing we can do about it. It's total horseshit. It makes me see red.
Yeah.
And all you can do is just pay your insurance.
Get out of the public street. You don't want your picture taken.
It's funny. I actually had the absolute opposite experience the last couple months in Minneapolis, in DC, and then in Richmond. In Minneapolis, I was like welcomed, and in fact, like when I got pepper sprayed in the face, and then the police started shooting rubber bullets at me. And not me, but like the crowd, even though clearly press, like, it didn't matter. But I actually had several of the activists grab me, even though, like, because I was basically completely blinded because I got shot directly in the face with the pepper spray, and pull me to safety, offer me milk and water, the protection, everything like that. And then, like, literally, like, one guy, like, grabbed sadly I wasn't able to connect with him. He actually picked up my glasses that were knocked off my face. I don't know where he is, but he saved my glasses.
Well,
but
two things.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, but it's been interesting because, like, at the same time, hearing different experiences from different cities and different groups, things like that. Like, I'm like literally like every example that people are talking about having problems when it comes to the movement of the last couple months, because it's distinctly, the movement of the last couple months is distinctly different than Ferguson. It's in my experience, it has been like, it's a different group of people. I mean, it's the same people, but it's more people than just the original kind of like groups across New York City and everything like that.
Okay. So
But
three points very briefly. Number one, what you just described was our uniform experience in Hong Kong.
Yeah.
They did everything for us.
Yeah.
It literally put their bodies between us and the police rifles. Number two, it has been my experience intermittently for years, but with acceleration, that protesters are being rougher and rougher on us.
Yeah.
But number three, here in Portland, the last 2 or 3 weeks, I have started to experience more of the Hong Kong gratitude, because they realized, especially when the feds were shooting anything that moved, people realized, no, we're not fake news. We're not taking pictures of people to turn them over to the police. Yeah. We're putting our asses on the line for peanuts, risking getting shot at, and most of us have been shot, and they know this. And we're starting to get some of that Hong Kong gratitude, and that's still happening.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm going to be out there in 2 hours, and it's going to happen again.
In New York, they came up to Stephanie and they gave her a bunch of shit. And I said, well, you sure don't mind having us photograph when the cops are beating the shit out of you, so you have evidence in court, so it's a, it's a double-edged sword.
It's a I mean, one of the big problems I found is that, like, especially when you're in, like, I'm in rural upstate New York. I don't have a city. Like, I don't have a place that I cover in so much. I mean, DC is the main thing that I cover, but I still don't live there, and I don't, attach it. And so, like, especially when you like talk about things on social media, and there's like people end up knowing who you are to some level. Activists. They're the activists I know. I have thousands of activists that follow me and follow my work and things like that. So I know that they're watching what I post and what I do. And so it's like, it is something that you have to start being considerably more conscious about and like in the work. But it was just such an interesting thing that like when those conversations in New York and that sort of thing were happening, that like at the same time, like I literally like the next day in Minneapolis, a random medic took a bunch of swings at me with a metal pole, and was yelling at both me and Carter Adams, a photographer from Ohio, to like, "Dad, don't take my photo." Neither of us took his photo or anywhere near taking a photo. And like immediately though, I'm not forgetting, 10 people swarmed him and like protected us. And so it was another one of those. And like, so it was just like, literally, it was like, no one knows who this person is. No one knows. I mean, like, I don't like going down the conspiracy lines of like, like infiltrators and things like that. Like I don't believe it. There's always an asshole. Like there's always an asshole who doesn't want his photo. That happened in Occupy Wall Street. That happened. I remember that during the Bush administration. Randomly, there'd be some person that would get really physical with a photographer. It's always happened. It definitely, I think what ends up happening is that like, but that actually leads me to a question back, and we're way past the original 40 minutes that we talked about. If anyone needs to leave, just, totally understand. I won't go too much longer. But I mean, one of the questions, because, I look at the faces here and we're talking about covering white supremacy. We're talking about like, I distinctly remember, I mean, something that I've talked about a ton is that, especially like considering like during that time period, Shea Horse was a Native American photojournalist, fantastic photographer, and wouldn't have been able to cover this without his knowledge and everything like that, like his everything. But like one thing that I would say was just like, I get to walk in to that crowd. Like I still distinctly remember walking to that crowd, seeing that the guy that we were talking about, which I hope I can pull up his, if this actually works. I think I might have canceled it, damn it. But that guy with the Nazi swastika tattooed on his chest, and like walking by him, taking his photo, and then continuing on with no problem whatsoever. And I still remember going, how did that just fucking happen? Like how, like, did I, as a member of the media, who I always feel like the media are like definitely a different like group of people or whatever. And I was just realizing, I'm like looking over the sea of whiteness that was Lee Park at that moment, because it certainly wasn't Emancipation Park at that moment. It was Lee Park, like, and going, oh yeah, no shit. I can do all of this because I'm white, blue-eyed, blonde hair, and everything like that. And
well,
so
remember
just
the
like,
night at the bar, the Georgia bar?
Yeah, I mean,
he's never spoken to me again.
Yeah, I mean, so I mean, like like especially that day, like, I mean, do you feel like, kind of adding on like whether or not the whole journalist press card and the camera gives you that, I don't know, like the metaphorical bulletproof vest or face mask or whatever. Like, do you feel like your whiteness gives you like a pass within covering this world? Obviously because I mean, it is a distinct difference between like covering like Black Lives Matter and that sort of thing. Like in DC, I was an outlier. It was mostly African American people there, especially when I covered it, and so it was a different conversation that I was having with people when we were both talking about. When I was talking to people about police violence, and I was like, they were like, "Oh, they treat us or whatever." I'm like, I've been there. I've been beaten up. I've been trampled. I've been arrested. But on a daily basis, I have no comparison to what the average African American person, especially in a major city, deals with when it comes to like, especially the DC police, who literally both Ford and I fist bumps with the Proud Boys. But
I don't feel that. I don't feel that way, because obviously, if you look at me for 2 seconds, I'm Jewish, if you listen to me for 2 seconds,
I don't see your. Sorry.
I don't
Put on your glasses.
I was going to make a terrible joke about how I don't see religions, or I don't see whatever. I'm sorry, but
yeah. I'm obviously Jewish. I'm obviously educated. I'm obviously from the North. I've obviously got cameras around my neck. I don't have any tattoos. I don't have any swastika tattoos. I don't have a Richard Spencer haircut. It's obvious that I'm not one of them. No, being white gives me, being black in a Charlottesville environment would be a lot worse. But being white gives me no, it's not a magical, get out of hell free card. On the other hand, as Jim Urquhart says, I can talk about guns and dogs and motorcycles perfectly well.
Yeah,
I know that world too. Yeah. And I can talk guns and dogs and motorcycles.
I think that
being able to do guns and dogs and motorcycles is a lot better get out of jail free card than being white.
I think though that like my experience, like covering CPAC and covering all these conferences, I think that what it does is it allows me the first question, and it allows me to talk. Like when I do interviews and things like that, it allows me to walk up to the person and immediately have a blank slate to ask that for a question, and then they decide who I am. And I found that at 1,000, not 1,000, but dozens of MAGA rallies and Trump rallies that I've covered, is that I get to walk up, and until, especially considering I work for a generic wire service that no one's ever heard of, or a random website that they've never heard of, like they have no assumptions. They go, "Oh, you're CNN," and then I go, "No, I'm not." And then the kind of the joke continues, but I'm able to get 3 or 4 questions in for the most part before they start to potentially, like whether it be literal Nazis or whether it be the farther right, real MAGA Donald Trump. I'm not talking just Republican or whatever, but like farther right, like realizes they'll be like, oh, maybe he's not from one of our associated sites or something like that.
Zach, I have to thank you so much, because when we went to Minneapolis together, I'd never done that before. We went to the belly of the MAGA beast, and I seriously couldn't have done it without you. And it was my first time. And then I wound up doing 4 more and taking the bus trip with them. But I just want to thank you for that. I don't know if I actually ever did, but when I got my thing of being able to separate my hatred from Donald Trump and my judgment about what I think who they are, and I would just go up and say, "What do you love about him?" And then it was not threatening at all to them. And then they would tell me, and they say most journalists try and do gotcha. All I had to do is just turn my camera on, right, where we met the Front Row Joe guy, because you were with me when we met, right? You took a trip with him. Yeah. So if you can suspend, I've learned so much about being a journalist this past year. If you can suspend your judgment and you can just be there as a fair witness, and not try and manipulate or anything, and just let it go, right? And that's like a kind of a learned thing, I guess.
I would say that, as a person who's covered, like CPAC, like Conservative Political Action Committee, Ford, you've covered that as well.
There's 6 of them.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I think I'm 4. I think I'm 4 and a couple and 4 NRAs.
I don't know how Ford does it. Ford's unbelievable.
Yeah. But like
Sandy said, I try to, the judgment does, like any personal judgments I have about any particular person, really, I don't think comes through in my work. No. Basically the only stuff that I sort of publicly state opinions on are essentially things that have a direct impact on press freedom. So things about accessibility of body cam footage, or the manner in which police handle people, or that sort of thing. I say explicitly, this person attacked a journalist, and that is bad. But otherwise, in general, I let images speak for themselves, and I tend to think that people who sincerely believe themselves to be in the correct position on something shouldn't feel threatened by that. So you were talking about people who are upset about cameras. I haven't experienced that a ton. One thing I pointed out to some protesters the other day who protested in front of the DHS secretary's house is I said, I actually feel more comfortable when protesters are masked. Like, Fox News and so forth.
That's everybody now, right?
Like, oh, well, I mean, I'm not even talking about because of COVID. I felt that way pre-COVID too. Yes, I feel more comfortable when people wear masks because of COVID as well, but that's an aside. No, when people wear masks, they can tell you who they really are, right? Ironically, right?
Yeah, they're much more comfortable on camera.
So people can more comfortably state their opinions without fear of reprisal from the police and so forth, and they can do whatever they're going to do. So not that I want my the relationship of my camera to whether somebody is masked or not to affect what they're doing. I hope to have no effect on the situation around me and just meaningfully record it. But I feel more comfortable that someone is less likely to feel threatened by me if they are masked, because that prevents it from, possibly having repercussions for them really of any kind.
Right.
Same with covering tattoos and all of that kind of stuff. I guess what was interesting about Charlottesville was how open they all were on the right-wing side, that there wasn't actually that much masking going on. These people felt so emboldened by the political moment that they were in, that they felt confident enough to go out and show their face. And like, they all have moms and dads and sisters and brothers, and some of them have children, right, who are going to see that stuff. And, I mean, I guess one of them has killed himself since it happened, but generally speaking... No,
that changed radically afterwards when people started getting boxed,
generally speaking, these guys started losing their jobs and so forth after the fact. And I mean, Zach and I covered together, there was a march of a group called Patriot Front that was led by a 20-year-old who I interviewed at Charlottesville. He called himself a fascist in an interview with me with his face on camera. He called himself a fascist. Yeah. He was only 18 in Charlottesville.
Russo?
That's Tommy Russo, yeah. And Tommy Russo actually managed to get himself arrested for putting up stickers the other day, by the way.
I saw that.
But
that's why he got arrested.
Well, it was like defacing property, but the explanation was that he was putting stickers up. Yeah. But in any event, I mean, so he went into Charlottesville unmasked, as did virtually everybody on the right. Now, we saw, I mean, I think Zach and I basically covered what I would say is
that's incredible.
The largest fascist march of the last year. Mm-hmm. And it was approximately 170 people, all carrying basically American flags, edited to include like a fasciste on them. I was about to say defaced, but I realized that like some people are like, oh, well, who cares? So whatever. Maybe defaced is a politically loaded term, but they were carrying flags that included the fascists on them, but they were all dressed in exactly the same outfit with exactly the same mask and glasses and so forth, effectively creating the same tactic as what Black Bloc is, but just of a different political flavor or aesthetic. The point being that I guess I'm making is, even to the extent to which the sort of avowed fascists are still able to organize and draw a crowd that big, which was shocking to me. They are now at the point where they are not, they clearly do not feel as emboldened to show their faces as they did in Charlottesville. And I think you'll readily find, even like Richard Spencer has said, like Antifa is winning, right? And I think that that is largely because people are, shamed on the right. Yeah, when you show up with people who have swastikas and so forth, people figure out who those guys are and then don't want to, work with them at Whole Foods or whatever their normal job is on the side.
Following up on that, Ford, I agree with you, and I'm sort of following up on myself too. But the astonishing thing to me about that Tiki Torch march was exactly what you just said, that people were out there saying it, and they weren't wearing masks, and they were absolutely out in the open.
Hate.
I only remember from that march, I only remember a handful of people turning away from my camera because of the low light and everything like that. It was difficult. It's like it would take a moment to focus and things like that. and so I did miss a couple shots of like, I have shots of people's like the back of their heads because they turned away before I was able to grab the image. And that was, I think also, yeah, it was really one of the most amazing shots. Because I mean, like the shot that is like overused and I'm like sick of it for a dozen different reasons, is a shot straight down the middle of the Tiki Torch March. And, you know, one of them are like raising their fists and doing different things and they're yelling. But I just like the fact that every single person is looking, they had to see me, because I know that there's also a person standing next to me taking photos. I don't know who it was, but like, John, you're in a couple of my shots, because I didn't know you then. But the fact that like you're able to shoot down the middle of 100, at least, you know, people that you can see in my photos, and I can see clearly most of their faces, and they're looking in my direction, see a camera, and yeah, I mean the idea that like it's changed since then. I mean, like it took a while too, because I mean like in Tennessee covered Murfreesboro. And Shelbyville, like shortly after that march, and it wasn't that much different. I mean, the fact that I also recognized like 30 people that were at Charlottesville that were at there, that was terrifying, especially considering one of them was the League of the South guy from, I'm blanking on his name, that was in the back of the photo from the parking garage, that DeAndre Harris being attacked with the leather jacket and the long beard. Is it Tubbs? I don't think it's Tubbs. I don't know. But the fact that he was there and like taking his photo again and realizing, I'm like, how aren't you in jail right now? Like, that's a whole different, you know what I mean? But like how, so like we'll wrap it up. I mean, we could go on, I think, for ages, but
thank you so much, Zach, for doing this. This is really great.
The last question, I mean, like, so I kind of asked the question in the beginning, but I mean, like 3 years on, you think shit has changed? Do you think that like our, like, you know, whether it be our work or whether it be like just the general kind of self-exposing that the far right did at Charlottesville, do you think it's changed much?
You know, something I learned in Charlottesville, because that was like a clean slate. I knew nothing about any of these groups, the names or anything. Mm-hmm. But when we went the night that Gavin McGinnis spoke at the Republican Club, I went there and I just stood there and photographed people coming in and going out. And that was something that I learned after Charlottesville, that my goal at being present at these events is to document who's there. This is what I look at it, is just to kind of just document who's there for whatever historic reason or whatever. And two of the guys are in jail now because I did that, you know, but I just stood there and that allowed me to get through this kind of scary situation, because it was like a fair witness thing. I knew that if I didn't do it, it wouldn't get done, you know, and that is the thing that keeps me like talking about the Tiki March. And I'm so FOMO. I wanted that so bad, right? And I did that, and that every time I miss a shot or a thing, you know, I was talking to Stephanie. We went to this blue back the blue, whatever thing. Yeah. And she were talking about something, and a bunch of photographers were saying, I said, oh fuck, I missed that. And she goes, that's what keeps us photographers. That's what keeps us coming back, because of the stuff we missed, right? But quite a group. It's an amazing group, you know.
We are not Schrodinger's photographer. We can only be in one place at a time.
I want it all.
You know, Zach, that question is like, it's a question for like a full episode.
Yeah.
I'll try to bring it into, has it changed as for a photographer? And I'm really interested to hear what you all think. I think it's just gotten more and more complicated. And when you go out into a situation, and I think the complications come from so many different areas, whether it's the police, whether it's Antifa, whether it's the right wing, whether it's like the new breed of social media, people who don't want you to shoot their faces. And because Occupy City Hall was really different from Occupy.
Oh, yeah. Well, they did not want their picture taken. Oh.
Yeah. And I even just looking at what I covered with, the presidential election in 16 to now. And a Bernie Sanders rally I was the first one where he announces candidacy in Queens.
Oh, I was there. Yeah.
There was this roiling around the media that they had the right to put their hands on you to go into the press and just shove you around. And I was like, boy, this has really changed from where it was like, okay, press, let's go into the pen. Let's go around the dais. Let's shoot. Here's like, all right, move. And they grab you and take you. And I'm like, this for me was like, wow, this has changed. In a small way. It wasn't aggressive, but I was also like, yeah, I wouldn't put my hands on you at your job. Like, why are you doing that to me? I think that there's more of it's just gotten more.
This is coming too from the time of Trump. I mean, I went to Trump. I think it's kind of what you're talking about. It used to be kind of a cachet to have a press pass. It was like kind of a cool thing. And now, when I went to my first Trump rally, where he goes, there's 20,000 people in Minneapolis, right? I think you left to go outside, and he goes, and you're the enemy of the people. You're fake news. And 20,000 people turn and boo and give you the finger. And it's like the Roman fucking gladiator, it's like thumbs down. It was a horrifying experience. And it was so disrespectful.
I don't think that's exclusive and limited to just Trump rallies. And what I'm saying about Bernie Sanders people, it just has become this weird umbrella over journalists, which is about press badge. How do you wear the press badge? Do you wear it? Is it a press badge or is it a bullseye? Yeah.
It's weird. It's like it's almost like a in-person Twitter verification mark. I'm sorry for it. And sorry, but Twitter give verify for it.
Two of us are verified.
But it's this weird thing where it's just like you end up being like, how did you get a press badge? Like you're a different thing, and I have experienced that at Bernie to obviously a lot lesser extent than Trump rallies, but like at different events now and that sort of thing, that you end up being this weird target for disdain. I mean, it's not for the most part, it's not terrible. I can handle it, but it is problematic if you're trying to be a journalist and trying to talk to people. And I think
perhaps John and Emily would talk about a bit about Hong Kong. Would you wear a press badge in Hong Kong right now?
Hell.
Oh my God, you'd be in jail.
I don't think so. We were kind of embraced. Now,
absolutely.
I don't know.
In Hong Kong, I think if we survived the police, if we survived the authorities, the people would love us. But I don't think we'd survive.
I mean, recently they were lining up who they thought were legitimate journalists and who they thought were fake journalists. So anyone who was like an independent journalist or a student journalist got sort of separated from the legitimate journalists. They're so-called legitimate journalists. Yeah. And they had all of their stuff searched. And, I would hate to see that spread, but, another thing, just going through how things have changed over the last couple of years, and not to say that this wasn't happening 3 years ago or more, but there's so many more independent, I'll say journalists, though I use the term loosely now, especially when you have people streaming and putting their own commentary over it that isn't necessarily factual or reporting. It's definitely caused some issues.
Yeah, that's a very, very, very important problem. And, you and I have talked about this, Emily, but I do not have an answer to that. I understand that it's a problem, and I really don't know how to deal with it. And I certainly don't have any insight into it overseas. Here, it's tough enough. But, I consider myself, neither brave nor a coward. I consider that I'm sort of average. But as much as I love China, as much as I love the Near East, the Far East rather, I would really, really, really have to think twice about going to Hong Kong. I mean, even leave aside the pandemic, forget about that. COVID's never happened. COVID has never happened. We're all, not wearing masks. I would have a real hard time talking myself into getting onto a plane for Hong Kong right now. It scares the
Getting
shit
on a
out of me.
plane, period.
I think under if there's a different government running the U.S. embassy, I might be a little less concerned. That's actually been one of the generally things that I keep thinking of, how much I would love to go to Belarus, how much I'd love to
Belarus,
everywhere at Eastern Europe right now. I mean,
Emily's dying, right?
I always have to. I always caveat. I mean, people outside of the world of photojournalism, like when we talk about this, when we talk about these things, it always sounds very kind of separated from separated from real life and separated from the real humanity of everything. And it's just no, we want to, this is what we chose to do in our field. And this is what we chose to do with our lives. And, consciously made decisions not to make money, basically. And so this is why, but the thing that we get out of it is being able to, go to places that are in terrible situations and try to come some good out of it. Ford, do you have any thoughts on where what years or whatever? Yeah,
I actually, and I didn't answer the question before on the moment, so I'm going to transition from a moment in Seaville to a trend of now, and then note something that's happening this Saturday to that extent. So we'll begin. Earlier I had mentioned how I totally agree with Michael, and I guess everybody really felt this way about the way that you feel sort of behind a camera, almost shielded, or a false sense of security. And I remember feeling that way in the morning of the violence of Charlottesville, until the moment that really snapped me into people could die, including me, but anybody, right, could die at this thing, was being filming over the shoulder as Richard Preston was a guy a public school employee, by the way, who also likes to lead his local Ku Klux Klan chapter, but not anymore because he's in jail now. Because, sorry, that was a run-on sentence. Need to use Grammarly for live checking what I'm saying. Look, he pointed a gun at a crowd, and I filmed it over his shoulder, and he reholstered the gun. And then he pointed the gun at the crowd again. And I wasn't at the moment of several minutes later, he fired one shot out of that same firearm, and it hit the ground. It was sort of in response to, or in the direction of, an individual who had created a makeshift flamethrower. But he ultimately was sentenced to 8 years in prison, with 4 of them suspended. So I think he'll get out in 2022. Assuming that it goes sort of according to the sentencing. But even though I didn't witness the moment that he fired it, I filmed the moments in which he was pointing it, and that felt really real. I feel like to the extent that I had seen firearms at events like this before, it really almost felt like a prop. It felt almost impossible that people would get shot with them, right? It really just seemed like a power thing to kind of carry them and be I am very manly, I have a gun. And I know someone watching this is going to be hey, that's not true. As they're cleaning their gun and watching this. I'm not making fun of you, whoever you are who feels threatened by what I just
said. That's your Facebook feed.
So that made it feel really real, and then that realness really snapped when the car crash happened. So I was around the corner basically when the car attack occurred, and I was so close to it, that even though I did not witness it, people commenting on my live stream commented, "Were those gunshots?" Which very obviously wasn't, but it very obviously was something loud. And as I ran in that direction, I did see the car going in reverse, and then of course I went in and filmed the sort of immediate aftermath, and it was very, it completely changed everything to actually essentially watch somebody die in front of me. And I remember the moment of actually saying it, like they're giving CPR to this person and they just stopped without any response, like in my mind, like that was it. It was an hour later that, you know, I got the word that like she actually had died, and we got a name later. But that was really, really traumatic, and I still haven't seen anything like it. It's still the only time that somebody has died at an event that I've been at.
Well, you know, just 3 nights ago, I was shooting one of the events in Portland, and somebody fired off 3 rounds.
Right.
I don't think you were there. Marinee was there.
I was at the one. Are you talking about I was at the one where the car drove through.
That's
and then
correct. It was
that was
that
the same
one.
one. Yeah,
it was the same one. Somebody fired off 3 rounds.
After a pickup truck tried to ram through protesters. So talk about Charlottesville.
Exactly so.
And a protester shot 3 rounds at the truck.
No, somebody fired off 3 rounds. We're not sure who. And Emily and I were talking, you know, within a couple of minutes, like, this is a Charlottesville moment. This guy drives a pickup, runs over a motorcycle, drags the motorcycle down the street, spewing sparks from the grinding of the metal on the asphalt. And then, like 3 or 4 minutes later, somebody fires a couple of rounds from a handgun.
Yeah.
And I had almost no reaction. I just, you know, I looked for a place to hide, waited for the gunshots to stop, then went out and started looking to see what to shoot next.
Right.
Because we're getting accustomed to this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, we've had.
That was the point I was going to make, to transition from my moment to my how has it changed things. I post Charlottesville, like in the sort of immediate aftermath of it, a sort of commentary that I had and had been talking a lot about is that I feel like there was sort of an arms race on the street. I think that Charlottesville was a lot of people's introduction to an armed left. I think that people had seen it as, oh, there's Black Lives Matter, and then there's like these right-wing militia dudes who sometimes show up with firearms, and we don't really know, you know, people have gotten used to the idea of right-wingers clinging to firearms at these events. But I think Charlottesville was people's introduction to an armed left. And I think that situation very much legitimized for a lot of leftists the idea that we need to get armed, the idea of community self-defense and so forth. And so I think that there's really been, in the last couple of years, almost like an arms race on the street, where now I'm seeing a lot more right-wingers show up with firearms, but I'm starting to see a lot more leftists show up with firearms than they had before. And there are individual explanations as to why they do that, and the degree to which they fetishize the idea of self-defense shootings, they vary drastically. So I'm not going to imply a symmetry between those two political strands, but I'm seeing a lot more armed people on really both sides of the political spectrum. The thing I was going to sort of lead it into is, like, 3 weeks ago now, I was in Kentucky, where now there is a group called the NFAC, the Not Fucking Around Coalition. And this is an all-black militia group that has only gathered so far 3 times. And I was there, and other than a security camera, I was the only camera that captured the moment in which one of them managed to shoot 3 people by accident. And only one critically injured, the other 2 non-critically injured. And they actually have not charged the individual who made the negligent discharge at this point. But 3 people were shot, and then the march still happened. Yeah. Right? I mean,
collateral damage, dude.
It's been fascinating because, I mean, like, one thing, I mean, like Stone Mountain, one thing that taught me was the fact that the police are teaching, I think, protesters on both sides, activists on both sides, not great lessons that are basically, if you show up heavily armed, you will not be arrested, you will not be tear gassed, you will not be beaten, you will not be fucked with. Because I mean, like, I just couldn't believe, like, the photos I was looking at the photos a couple days ago from Stone Mountain, and I'm just like, I know that guy. I'm friends with friends on Facebook with the guy that I took a photo of, and he's holding I think it was an AR-15 in the middle of the street, and he actually was directing traffic at that moment. Yeah. With police, I knew police were behind me, and I'm just like, I just think about the number of peaceful, like, protest, and I say peaceful as in unarmed, like just marching down the street, maybe marching down sidewalks, even not even like doing anything else, and the amount of beatings and tear gas and pepper spray and everything that I've witnessed and personally experienced as well. But I'm like, not a single, you barely saw the police that day. You were there too. And it's just like, that was one of the most enlightening. And I'm like, this is a bad lesson. This is a really bad lesson that you're teaching both sides. Cause I mean, I've covered the anti-mask rallies, which were, basically Trump rallies. And everyone showed up when it would be Pennsylvania and Ohio. Now I feel like they've kind of morphed, the anti-mask rallies have kind of morphed into Blue Lives Matter, whatever, kind of incarnation you want to call it, rallies. And like the last one I covered in Albany had a half dozen oath keepers, and the MC was an oath keeper herself, and 3 or 4 elected officials from the New York State legislature showed up and spoke alongside. And also the constitutional sheriff's peace officer, the CSPOA, the guys that basically are county sheriffs that believe that they are the final line of where the Constitution is. They get to decide what the Constitution is, which was a wild argument. I got into the leader of it, but he's an ally with the Oath Keepers, and like the fact that like obviously it's New York State, so no one, at least as far as I could tell, had guns. But like in Pennsylvania and in Ohio, everyone just shows up armed to the teeth, like it's either a Blue Lives Matter rally or an anti-mask rally where guns aren't the discussion. Like the Second Amendment rally that we all, most of us covered down in Richmond. No shit. Yeah, of course he's showing up with guns. Never mind the fact that like, what was it? 10,000 people showed up in the streets of Richmond. 22,000, and not a single. I mean, I'm sure there was an arrest or something. Maybe wasn't there?
No, there was one arrest.
There's one. Okay, there was one arrest, but like nothing happened.
Can I ask something?
Yeah.
When Trump is either going to go down or he's going to get reelected, either way. Today I covered the most bizarre thing I've ever seen. There was a bunch of QAnon people. And they were anti-mask. They were in New York City, in Washington Square Park, because everybody in New York has masks. I don't know, people in New York, most of us here, because we had a mandatory mask law, and most of them wear masks. But these guys are these QAnons are so fucking out there, and it's a thing about pedophiles. I don't know if you've heard about this. It's like this latest thing where these Save the Children, hashtag Save the Children, have infiltrated QAnon. My question is, when this happens, I happen to believe, because of my source, that Trump will be indicted before the election, or if he's reelected, and you'll all be calling me.
I will call you out. Like I said, if he is indicted, if he's pulled out of the White House in chains, I will be the first person on the phone.
What do you think is going to happen? Do you think there's going to be a civil war? Do you think all the armed people? I mean, do you guys have any feelings about that? I'm just curious because we know the possibility. I think
about that night and day, literally night and day.
Yeah.
Because I cannot see a good end to this. If there's a massive Joe Biden victory, that might conceivably tamp down some of the lunacy of the Trumpies, but I'm not confident of that. If Trump wins overwhelmingly, then the question is academic. Country's finished, and I'm leaving.
Yeah, it's over. The last election.
It will be the last election. The worst situation is if there's a close election, either close Biden or close Trump, makes no difference. Then there's going to be blood in the streets.
I mean, and the biggest problem. It's going to be a 2-week long election. That's the biggest problem at the end of the day. It's going to be a 2-week long election. It's going to make, like, obviously the 2000 was my first election I ever voted in, and my earliest memory and why I ended up getting into voter suppression and covering this sort of thing. But it's going to be a 2-week long election, and that's going to be the 2 weeks that it's going to be a goddamn shit show, because the states that the states that are having the biggest problems with mail-in ballots and that sort of thing are all swing states. Not surprisingly. I mean, it's purposeful and everything like that. And also run by Republicans who really are allied, like Florida. You know, I mean, like I basically expect, like my mom had a condo in Palm Beach, and I'm really angry at her that she just sold it, because I'm like, I'm going to live there for basically for November. Because like I know that it's going to be in Palm Beach is going to be a complete nightmare. That's where I spent a week in 2018. But yeah, no, I mean, I think either way, like what I worry most about, because in the hopeful way, is that the Biden wins, and then we all, like we did in 2008, we all just as a country go, the last 8 years didn't happen, and we just forget about, like in 2008 when we just all magically forgot about Bush, and we forgot about all the war crimes that these people committed, you know, openly, with well documented, and nothing happened. And that's what I expect Joe Biden is going to do, is we're just going to walk directly in here. And I deeply worry, because I mean, one of the biggest problems with Barack Obama was that he didn't move quick enough to basically clean out the Bush administration appointees and things like that. He took 4 years to really do anything when it came to that, like the lower level stuff, the stuff that didn't need Senate approval and that sort of thing. And it affected his presidency dramatically. And I can't, and the numbers of people that we know for a fact have just evacuated government work over the last 4 years are going to have a dramatic effect. I mean, if he doesn't dissolve the DHS and reform it in some other way, then we're all screwed one way or the other. I mean, we're all fine. I mean, but I'm just saying, like, we as a metaphor
want to get rid of ICE.
What's that?
Kamala Harris stated unequivocally that she's pro ICE.
Oh, I mean, but I'm just saying, but like to me, that's one of the deepest worries, is that the metaphorical and real infection virus that Trump has put on our country for the last 3 years, and especially the last year, isn't going to change unless radical change ends up happening. And, you know, that's not going to happen. But that said, like, again, like back to the original thing, which is like, if it's a close election, like I had a documentary planned that I was supposed to shoot in Northern Ireland in late November, and I just, for a dozen different reasons, I pushed it off, and I'm like, no, I have to be in America. Never mind. I won't be able to leave. You have to be here. It's a documentary about the Troubles, and about and I'm just like, I'm going to be here. I'm sorry, my friend.
That's going to be a Quaker picnic compared to what's going on.
And so,
guys, I've got to go.
Let me just say one thing about New York and Cy Vance, because I know some stuff.
Everybody can sign off. If you need to sign off, sign off.
No, okay. Yeah, if anybody needs to leave, just quickly. Cy Vance has got the Deutsche Bank records, Trump's Deutsche Bank records. He's got, he will be getting next week his taxes, and he will be calling grand jury, and they will be hearing everything that I heard in the Deutsche Bank hearings, and Trump won't survive this. And that's even worse, because all those people out there, all those magazine stuff, are all of a sudden it's going to be fake news, and
of course it's going to be fake news.
It's going to be fake news.
Yeah, of course.
Because that's the fascist state that has set it up. You know,
but
so that's what I'm afraid of. We have proof, and it's
all right. John, be safe.
Okay. All right, guys. Love you.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you for your time.
Okay. Let's do it again next year. Okay.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.
Same time, same place.
Yes.
Bye-bye.
Have a good night.